Hi, this is Rabbi Cat from Beit Tikkun with my musings on this week's parsha Miketz. This week we continue with the saga of Jacob, Joseph, and his brothers. Joseph has an uncanny ability to continually be exalted and then disgraced. He is the favored son. His brothers are so jealous that they sell him into slavery. And while enslaved, Joseph, becomes so entrusted that his owner puts him in charge of everything in his home. The master's wife seeks Joseph's attention and wants to have sex with him. Joseph refuses and tells her that he has control over everything in the house and is second in the house only to his master. Perhaps out of anger that he won't sleep with her, or perhaps out of anger that Joseph flaunts his power in the home, or both. She accuses him of raping her, and he is thrown into prison. Even in prison, he is put in charge of all the prisoners. Eventually, the Pharaoh seeks Joseph to interpret his disturbing dreams. Joseph does so. The dreams indicate that there are going to be 7 years of abundance coming to the land, followed by 7 years of extreme famine. The land will not produce food. Pharaoh is so awed by Joseph's interpretation that he puts Joseph in charge of all the land and the people in Egypt. He is second in command only to Pharaoh. You might think that Joseph's experiences of being thrown into a pit by his brothers and sold into slavery, and then being sent to prison after having so much power, might teach Joseph to have some humility or to reflect on his past behavior. But apparently not. He uses his power to amass great wealth for Pharaoh and for himself, and power for himself. He controls all the food and resources in Egypt and gathers the grains and stores them during the years of abundance so that they can be distributed during the years of famine. All of that sounds reasonable enough, but as we will discuss next week, he actually ends up forcing the Egyptians to sell themselves and their land to get grain and resources during the years of the famine. In addition, in this week's parsha, he uses his power to punish, deceive, and torment his brothers. They come to Egypt to get provisions during the famine, and rather than expose who he is and welcome them with open arms, or perhaps with some resistance, or concern, or even anger, he deceives them, does not disclose who he is, and accuses them of being spies. He imprisons them for 3 days and then keeps Simeon imprisoned while the brothers return, until the brothers return to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph's youngest brother and only sibling from his mother Rachel. While one can certainly have compassion for Joseph given how his brothers treated him, still nowhere in Joseph's story do we see him reflect upon his own behavior. Jacob wrestles with God and is given the name Yisrael. Reuben, Jacob's firstborn son, who is certainly jealous that Joseph is the favored son and thus might inherit Jacob's riches, tells the brothers not to kill Joseph, but throw him into a pit, intending to return later to free him. Judah convinces the brothers to sell Joseph into slavery. We see in this family saga Judah's emotional growth as well. This happens in 2 different ways. First, in his interaction with Tamar, in which she tricks her, in which she tricks him, but ultimately he recognizes that she is more righteous than he is. And then the second is when the brothers need to return to Egypt to get more provisions. And Judah, has to convince Jacob to let them take Benjamin with them back to Egypt to get the provisions. Jacob, understandably, is very reluctant to let the brothers take Benjamin with them. He's already lost Joseph. Simeon's already imprisoned in Egypt, and he doesn't know if he'll see him again. So he's very reluctant to let them take Benjamin. Judah, who himself has lost two sons, understands the pain and grief that Jacob feels. He steps up and promises Jacob that he will be responsible for Benjamin's safety. He tells Jacob that if anything happens to Benjamin, Judah will stand guilty before Jacob. And finally, when Joseph plants his divination cup in Benjamin's bag and tells them, the brothers, that Benjamin will now be a slave, it is Judah who steps up and begs Joseph to take Judah in Benjamin's place. Yet throughout this whole story, we do not really see much, if any, psychological growth, reflection, or humility on the part of Joseph. What can we learn from this? When empires and leaders believe they are indestructible and all-powerful, when they claim to be the best, most moral nation in the world, when they neglect to reflect upon or take responsibility for the harm caused in the founding of the nation to the present time, ultimately that nation itself and even the land becomes corrupted with evil. And when that happens, the nation risks deepened and prolonged corruption, internal strife often evolving into civil war and destruction. Perhaps that is what we are watching unfold right now in both Israel and the United States. Both think and act with impunity, as if they are all powerful and immune from destruction. They respond to threats with more destruction, wars, murders, and loss of lives. But ultimately, just as human beings fall from grace, so too, the Torah warns us, will nations, if they do not create a loving and just society. The collapse of Western empire is going to take some time, but ultimately it will collapse because it is not sustainable in its current form. Something else will arise in its place. May that process unfold with as much peace and nonviolence as possible for all peoples, and may all nations become societies based on truth, justice, and peace. And that includes recognizing past and present harm, apologizing, and making reparations and repairs. Shabbat Shalom. A quick reminder, we are hosting our Hanukkah celebration tomorrow night, Saturday, December 28th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, both in person in Berkeley, California, and on Zoom. We'd love to have you join us. You can learn more and register in the link below. So I hope to see you there. Shabbat Shalom.